right now, a silent coup is unfolding inside your skull. Your goals, your ambitions, your focus, they're being overthrown by a traitor you've trusted your whole life, your own brain. 85% of personal optimization plans fail not because you're lazy, but because evolution has rigged your mind to crave comfort, distraction, and instant rewards. And every time you try harder, the dictator that is your brain tightens its grip. But research, neuroscience research specifically, has cracked that code. And today, you'll learn 5 forbidden tactics to overthrow your brain's sabotage. These practices are used by Nobel Prize laureates to break creative blocks. They're used by Navy SEALs to master split-second decisions in very high-stakes situations, and by NASA engineers to thrive in chaotic times. So mission 1, execute the biggest lie you've been told, that motivation comes before action. Your liberation starts now, thanks in part to the optimization edge. I'm Dr. Derik Perry, and for 30 years I've advised many organizations of different shapes and sizes and orientations, either as a leader or as a strategic advisor. These organizations include the Pentagon on high-stakes military capacity and capability development. I've helped Fortune 500 companies and smaller, as well as government agencies navigate significant organizational change and digital transformation efforts, and I've worked with teams of engineers and consultants, as well as product managers, on improving their decision-making and improving their consultative process under pressure and in critical times. And lastly, I've mentored many a student at the high school, college, and graduate school level. But here's the little dirty secret of optimization, is that optimizing your own brain is harder than any of that. Why? Because in a boardroom or as an industry, the variables of change are relatively clear. It's people, process, technology, organizational culture, environmental conditions. But in life, the variables are not so clear. And there are many, many, many different variables. And your brain plays tricks on you. It craves distraction, it confuses planning with progress, and it thinks perfect is impossible. So I've spent the last decade testing some of these methods, not just in labs, but in messy reality of startups, grad school, and also in raising 2 daughters. And today, I'm giving you the only 5 tools that survive the gauntlet of peer-reviewed research and real-world chaos. Our discussion today is built upon a solid foundation of rigorous scientific inquiry. We'll be drawing upon insights from leading academic works that dive deep into the mechanism of self-regulation and goal attainment. These aren't just theories, these are protocols that have been tested and refined by top researchers. And as always, let's get into the science. First, we have a meta-analysis of the effects of mental contrasting with implementation intentions on goal attainment. This is a 2021 research by a few folks from the School of Psychology, Northeast Normal University in China. And it was a comprehensive review of over 21 empirical studies that looked at over 15,000 participants to evaluate effectiveness of a strategy known as mental contrasting with implementation intentions, or MCII. But it's also more popularly known as a acronym, WOOP, and I'll get to that later. We'll explore various types of factors that might influence how this strategy works and how the style of intervention actually presents itself. Secondly, we'll examine a crucial real-world application, changing resident physician studying behaviors, a randomized comparative effectiveness trial of goal setting versus the use of WOOP, published in 2017 by Daniel Sadawi Kananifka and colleagues from Mass General Hospital and NYU, including co-creator of the WOOP approach, Dr. Gabrielle Adagen and Dr. Peter Golwitz. So this study specifically investigates whether using WOOP could improve study habits among busy medical residents compared to the traditional goal-setting practices, and it addresses a critical challenge in self-regulated learning. So together, these papers provide us with a pretty powerful group of evidence-based understanding of how to overcome self-sabotage and achieve your goals more effectively. And they are not just related to medical students. It is very transparent. So in my effort to bring you the science behind doing better, optimizing around your goals, let's look at some of the reasons why your brain sabotages optimization. And if the goal is to understand these causes, then you can do things about them. So there's a myriad of reasons why we don't exercise our goals and exercise the things necessary to achieve our goals. Lots of reasons occur, and there's some science around all of them, but let's just talk about a few of them. First, the planning fallacy. A 2024 Nature of Human Behavior study tracked 1,200 people setting goals. And those who spent the most time focusing on the planning aspects of things were 23% less likely to actually take action in achieving those goals. Why is that? It's because they got a charge out of the planning aspects of things. And planning is important because you need to create plans to achieve your goals. Otherwise, there's just daydreams here. But if you over-engineer your plans, you'll start to feel actually like you're being productive. I'm doing, but you're not actually doing the things to move the needle or move the train down the tracks. It's actually procrastination in disguise. This, I can say, was an experience that I had when I was mentoring a coworker who was stressed about getting fit. And this guy was an amazing cyber engineer. He was doing some very interesting research on government supply chains and how AI could be used to essentially protect these supply chains. So he was doing stuff that was like really out there, very avant-garde research. But he was at the same time a very large man. Offensive lineman size, large, 6'3", approximately 290 pounds. So he's a big dude. And he wanted to lose some weight without losing muscle mass. And so this super smart guy got super in the weeds, and he started engineering a plan to get the perfect workout. And I talked to him about it often. He wanted to start tracking his macros, and he lined up a gym cycle and a schedule. Bought some new shoes. Had a tracker to track his activities, but he quit relatively recently. After I followed back up with him, I was like, "How's it going?" Wasn't going at all, as a matter of fact. And it wasn't going is because he over-engineered his plan. It was so many details around it. It was a lot of activity, tracking macros, tracking his schedule, having an accountability partner lined up on certain days, but he just basically flaked on it. And, I was like, well, what gives? How did that happen? Why are you still not going to the gym? And the rationale he gave me was because, I've kind of lost interest, and I was enjoying the building of the plan, but not the execution of the plan. And I said, okay, that makes sense. So I asked him, had he heard about the 10-minute rule? And that was my suggestion around fixing this whole approach to an over-engineered schedule and process. He said he hadn't. And I think that bore some fruit, but we'll get to what that 10-minute rule actually is in a little bit later. Some of the other brain distractions that are keeping you from actually tackling your goals is your phone. Your phone has all these notifications to them, and it's not just distracting you from your plans, it's actually rewiring your brain. There's lots of research on how the brain is impacted by social media, by simply having the phone on your desk when you're trying to get things done. And a 2023 study of computers in human behavior found that even just seeing your phone reduces your working memory by like 10 to 15%. And every notification that you get will hijack you in your focus for at least 10 to 15 more minutes. So anytime you hear your phone go off, or that you, or even just seeing your phone on your desktop, even if it's turned face down, it's an attention grabber. Okay. And that's not multitasking. When you're thinking about your phone, is it ringing? Or did I hear that? Or am I supposed to be doing something else? That's not multitasking. That's attention bankruptcy. And attention is really, really valuable because it's energy. Where you put your energy, you're going to be focused. And if you're multitasking and code switching, then you're definitely going to be in a bankrupt situation. And the third area that I want to talk about around how your brain is distracting you and keeping you from your goals is the notion of motivation. Okay? Yeah, I'm going to start this and I'm going to be motivated to start something and make it happen. And I'm going to wait till I feel like it. Well, waiting till you feel like it is a very common refrain I've heard from a lot of folks. And unfortunately, that really is a big fallacy. The motivation of myth. I will start when I'm motivated. A specific 2024 meta-analysis in the Psychological Science Journal proved that motivation actually follows action rather than motivation preceding action. Elite athletes don't feel like training at 5 a.m., but they use pre-commitment hacks like the WOOP method that I mentioned earlier, and I'll get into that in detail shortly, as a way of bypassing this resistance. Being prepared to do something is better than actually saying, I'm going to wait till I'm motivated to do something, because once you start in the activity, you'll actually continue it. And the joy of connection with achieving your goals will happen after or during your exercise of your action to achieve those goals. So how do I deal with the multitude of things that keep me from my goals, whether it's the motivation myth or being distracted by my phone or over planning or over engineering things? All those things will take you away from trying to achieve your goals. Since this show is about scientific hacks and protocols to be optimized, we're going to give you 5 lab-tested tools that will help you overcome those things so you could be actionable, scientifically bound, and really prosper in your optimization efforts. And so first, let's talk about WOOP. Okay? You've heard of SMART goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-bound. People say goals should always be SMART. Well, there's new research that says your goals ought to be WOOP, WOOPish specifically. So what is WOOP? Well, WOOP is wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. I want to finish this proposal is your wish. Your outcome, I'll feel proud and relieved when it's finished. The obstacle, I procrastinate when I feel overwhelmed. I have too much to do. So what's the plan to overcome that obstacle? Well, I'll start with writing bullet points on why this proposal or what goes into this proposal. And that is groundbreaking work from the psychological science that found WOOP users were 32% more likely to follow through because it pre-exposes obstacles. It's like a vaccine to procrastination. It's fascinating. So real world example, Stanford MBA student used WOOP to tackle her thesis. Her obstacle, I'll scroll on Instagram when I'm stuck, clear my head. Her plan, if I reach for my phone, I'll set a 2-minute timer and I'll free write ideas first. And she finished 2 weeks early after doing that. Pomodoro, if you've heard about that, the Pomodoro technique is focus, break, and being very structured around that. Using a physical timer, not your phone, to set a 25 minute, I think Pomodoro can be 20 or 25, but either way, it's a prescribed time for half an hour, so to speak, and half an hour blocks of work. It says essentially you work for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute, super 5-minute tight break. And by doing that, you're able to be productive, anticipate productive time, and also anticipate off. So again, using the Pomodoro method is a great way of getting rid of issues associated with staying focused for long periods of time, because you got an end time that's coming up relatively quickly. And after doing, let's say, 4 sessions of Pomodoro, then you should take a much longer break around strategic daytiming, staring out a window, taking your glasses off to see things in a different light. And the research study says people are much more creative when they're following a structured work approach. So if creativity matters to you, then think about using the Pomodoro method of time bounding. Another example of how you can hack your brain is one that I remember being used on me, and particularly in a group setting, where our team specifically was having difficulty focusing. And we were assigned a task, given much leeway in how long we needed to complete this. And I remember this specifically because it was part of my PhD study group and a class assignment that we had. And we had lots of those. But the issue was, hey, go work on this particular task. And our group was really chattery. We loved to talk about stuff, and everybody had opinion, but we weren't working on the task at hand. So someone suggested, hey, can we just take 10 minutes to focus on this, and then we'll get back to the other issues. And we'll talk about how those other things relate to the bigger task at hand. And that 10-minute rule, which was let's just take 10 minutes to focus down deep in a particular area, actually led us to increased productivity, specifically around getting started. So you take 10 minutes, you focus, you're like, oh, we are making progress. And that reminder actually allowed us to get out of group dynamic and into group work much more effectively. And then the other comments that we were talking about earlier that were somewhat related came back into the fold. And so starting with let's just focus for 10 minutes actually was a good way of getting into the action. The fourth way of trying to break our brain's hold on optimization is around satisficing for decisions. And again, you heard earlier about when you're maximizing your planning, you're trying to make the perfect XYZ, whatever your widget is you're trying to build. And so while you're thinking about perfection, you are stopping yourself from actually executing because you're saying, I got to build the perfect mousetrap or whatever. And that psychological orientation towards perfection actually slows you down. It stops you from moving forward. And the change in mindset you need to make is around satisficing, which is how do I get better? How do I start with maybe a good enough thing? And I'll incrementally improve that along the way. And studies show that satisficers tend to be much less regretful about their work and more likely than to start versus folks who are thinking about the perfect. My colleague who I mentioned earlier, who's a cyber engineer, he kind of was a perfectionist because he wanted it to be perfect. He wanted his workout plan to be super tight. And by over engineering things, he started, but he lost interest along the way because was he living up to the perfect? Was he achieving his total dream? And unfortunately, sometimes your dream has to come in incrementally. So, starting the ball rolling, starting your workouts, starting getting healthier, starting emails is a great thing around getting it down good enough and improving later. And the last hack around getting your brain's efforts to sabotage your goals out of the question is to do energy mapping. And a lot of engineers automatically think this way, but sometimes it's helpful to actually track it. And that is looking at when are you most energized? We all need sleep, we all need to eat, and we all have our ideal times on when we'd like to work. So some people are much more focused in the morning, some people are much more focused in the afternoon. And so if you track your times on when you are most effective, then think about it from the perspective of how can I do my best work and when can I do my best work? And it's not always easy to do because, we also interact within teams. We have deliverables for our projects, our classwork, our work. And, we're expected to get things done on time, and we often need to interact and interoperate with people in order to get these things done. So you can't always necessarily say, I'm only going to work in the mornings. But you can think about it from the perspective of where do I get my energy? Where am I most creative in writing and so forth? And if you think about it and you've tracked it for a while, you can actually then say, let me orient myself to block time so that I can have this focus time on my calendar, that I'm doing my own work. I'm turning off notifications or distractions, or limiting them or minimizing them as most as possible during those focus times so that I can be more productive, and actually blocking your calendar and make it look like you're in a meeting, if so, because sometimes you need to in order to remove those distractions. I know that is kind of a big thing at Amazon. I know a couple of people who work there, and they say, gee, that's kind of expected, is that, you have to work in teams, you have to get things done, but sometimes you need to block your calendar so that you can work during your optimal times on the things that you need to do. And if you need to block times together with people, then do it that way. So hearing all these ways to beat your brain from sabotaging your goal orientation, I'm asking, in the clarion corner of this podcast, is that you tell me, how do you put this stuff into action? You got 5 options here, how to unhack your brain's sabotaging of your goals. You could WOOP your most dreaded task, okay? Instead of writing a SMART goal, let's think about a WOOP approach to achieving one of your goals, okay? Or do a Pomodoro session or 2 or 4 with a physical timer. Don't use your phone. Use your computer even as a timer. Or you're going to satisfy one of your decisions today. You're going to say, I'm going to go to the gym at a time that fits, period. Not just at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:30. I'm going to go to the gym at a time that I can best get it in. Or are you going to try to do something around 10 minutes, okay? If I'm having difficulty, really struggling, let me just put 10 minutes down and see how that goes, which is obviously motivating yourself intrinsically from the actual activity itself. Or lastly, are you going to really say, let me focus on when's the best time to get my energy right for whatever particular task I'm trying to do, and I'm going to block that time. So tell us, pick one of those goals, pick one of those approaches to achieving your goals, apply it, and tell us what works. We'd love to hear about it. Applying one of these methods is really the antidote to overcoming your brain's approach to sabotaging your goals. This is really the antidote. The truth is, your brain isn't broken. It's just stuck in outdated patterns. It's doing what it likes to do because it's comfortable, your brain. And we're saying, try these hacks. They're like software updates, little tweaks that will yield massive returns. So give it a shot. And next week, we'll talk about focus and optimizing using tools. There's lots of other tools that are focused on optimizing, in particular, artificial intelligence. So take one of these Clarion Corner challenges to heart. Try one of those 5 examples of how do you tweak and hack yourself. Okay? Optimize wisely. And remember, small steps beat standing still every time. This is Derik Perry signing off. I'll see you next time at The Edge, the Optimization Edge.